Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. This past weekend, I read a really fascinating column in the newspaper about the impact of media algorithms. And you know what? I don't even know what an algorithm is. So I thought it'd be really interesting, number one, to read the article, which I did, but then number two, to meet the author. And it turns out the author, Hilary Boehm-Edwards, is a first-year commerce student at McMaster University, and she got motivated to write this article published in the Toronto Star about her opinion about the dangers of media algorithms and their ability to polarize opinions. Hilary Boehm-Edwards, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let me ask you, what motivated you to write an article and publish in the Toronto Star about media algorithms and how bad they are?
Yeah, so the deal was with my prof. So I'm taking communications as an elective because I'm a commerce student. And he told us that our assignment was to write an 800-word opinion editorial on any concepts that pertain to media. He gave us prompts, but I chose to go away from the prompts and pick my own subject, which was media algorithms. And the deal was that if we got published in the Toronto Star, we would get 100% on the assignment. So, of course, I submitted at the end. I was pretty excited about that.
You should have called them up and said, if I get interviewed on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, do I get 110%?
Yeah, I should have. I'm sure I'll show him when I get back from my reading week for sure. But yeah, so media algorithms, I honestly learned about them. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario originally, and my dad is the superintendent of learning technologies at the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and he always brought home conversations about digital information, technology, things like that. And basically, these were our dinner table conversations. We'd talk about anything in the world of technology. And one of the concepts that he brought up was media algorithms. So
Okay.
I became fascinated by that. You start to recognize when you learn more about what media algorithms are, where you see them while you're scrolling through social media or on any one of the digital apps. And so when I was given this opportunity to write this opinion editorial, I thought, there's no better topic than writing about something I already know about. So,
well, we appreciate the education in it. So let's take a step back. And I think all of us have heard about algorithms, but why don't you explain what is a media algorithm?
Yeah, so basically a media algorithm sorts a user's feed based on the content that they interact with previously. So it's in every single social media app, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all of them. And basically, depending on how you interact with certain posts, it will give you a feed and put the stories at the top of your feed that relate most to what you've interacted with previously. So it basically, like if you look at TikTok, for example, if you like one video about say anything, cats, then the next 5 videos you get will probably have a cat in them. But obviously it pertains to much bigger issues like political issues, controversies, things like that.
How do they do that? How do they track what you're doing?
It's basically a computer code. A lot of the time there are things that we accept without knowing. It's almost unconscious. You head onto a website and you accept something called cookies and you don't entirely know what it is and you just say, yeah, that's great. And then once you give the app permission to do these things, then this computer code it's human made, but obviously it's also related to AI technology, and it then sorts all of your feed from there on.
So what is a cookie?
A cookie? That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know too much about cookies, but I know that they're another sort of preferences that you accept once you join any type of website, and a lot of the time they do have to do with giving data that you are putting into your feed. So anytime that you interact with anything digitally, you're sending data back to the company that they're able to use for basically any of their marketing research, general research, their sorting, their algorithms, things like that.
So the way I've had it explained is it's sort of like leaving a digital footprint behind.
Exactly.
So that people know that you were there. So these media algorithms, they track what you pay attention to, what you like, and then it almost it's a money making or addictive making. They want you to keep coming back, so they keep on sending you stuff that you're interested in. How does this impact from a political standpoint? Because you said that it has a ability to polarize opinions.
Yeah, so definitely from a political standpoint, the thing about media algorithms is that as you interact with things, not only does this algorithm give you relevant information to what you've interacted with previously, but it also gives you the most popular posts that are relevant to that previous topic. So a lot of the time, the popularity on posts has to do with how radical information is. If it gets more comments, it's probably because there's very diverse opinions on that topic and people are going on to this post to give their own opinion about it. So what happens is once you like one thing, so let's say you're a partisan for one party and you've read an article about a Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, for example, and now that you've interacted with that, the next post that you're going to get regarding Justin Trudeau is not only going to have to do with Justin Trudeau, but it's also going to be a more radical opinion about Justin Trudeau because that's where the popularity comes from when it comes to politics. So this can basically send anyone with political interests down a rabbit hole that's very polarized between different liberal political parties, things like that. So my example in my opinion editorial had to do with Trump and it had to do with Justin Trudeau. And a lot of the times I actually followed the US elections a lot when Trump was battling against Biden. And the thing is that people who are Trump defenders versus people who are Biden defenders very often have very, very polarized opinions on the subject. You never have a very pleasant political conversation. They're always very adamant and very passionate about the one political leader or the other. And the problem with this is that they're only really interpreting what they get from one side of the story. They're not getting the perspective of the other politician because once they've interacted with a certain one, they're only seeing news and media that relates to that person specifically.
What do your classmates and friends think when you got your column published in the Toronto Star?
I think a lot of them were pretty impressed, I have to say. It's almost funny at McMaster because it's definitely a science school. And when I tell people that I'm in commerce, it's almost like a downgrade, which I think is funny because McMaster Commerce is a great program. But when I told some of my kinesiology friends that I got published and they read it through the article and they were like, oh my gosh, you're actually smart. And I was like, I don't know. I grew up with an English teacher mom, so I know how to write articles. I know how to write essays because she basically drilled it into my head since the 6th grade probably. But no, it's pretty exciting because I don't think teenagers or young adults think a lot about the newspaper. They think that that's very much something that our generation doesn't really view as much. So when they saw that I was published in that, they're like, wow, like that's actually, it's a big feat to be published in there for sure. And I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, it was pretty smart of your professor giving you that incentive of the 100% if you got published. That's great. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Hillary Boehm-Edwards about media algorithms. And we're going to understand, what this is doing to our society, because I think she's right. It's taking us all into these echo chambers, and we need to be wary of this. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Real pleasure of mine to chat tonight with Hillary Boehm-Edwards. She's a first-year commerce student at McMaster University. And last weekend, I was really fascinated to read a column that she had written and got published in the Toronto Star. And it was on a really interesting topic, the impact of media algorithms. And the title was actually The Dangers of Media Algorithms. Who is in control of a user's opinions? So this is suggesting that you think that the media actually can control our opinions, so that we're going down these rabbit holes or into these echo chambers so forcefully that you think that the algorithm is controlling our opinions. And you said Trump and Biden, but also you highlighted the role of the media algorithms in really polarizing our opinions on COVID-19, the vaccine, and whether we should take the vaccine, etc., and vaccine hesitancy. Explain that to us if you could. Okay, Hillary?
Yeah, for sure. So the COVID vaccine it was a lot like politics, where there are two very diverse opinions on the topic. There are people who were willing to get the vaccine, and there are people who are very much so against the vaccine. And you look at how media algorithms can influence this. So if someone were to be hesitant about the COVID vaccine, of course they'd research the side effects of it. And you start with very basic side effects, but because media algorithms perpetuate much more radical opinions, you start seeing common misconceptions about the vaccine. People were worried that it was influencing women's fertility, it can alter your DNA. A lot of people were saying, at the more radical point of view, that the government was trying to control us, put microchips in our bodies, things like that, where you know that it's realistically a misconception about the vaccine. We've been using vaccines since, I don't know, the 1900s, and we know that there's a process to creating these vaccines, and it's tested and it's tried and true. So obviously not to invalidate the opinions of those, but I think that with COVID-19, media algorithms did play a huge role in that, because what could start as a simple search about common vaccine common vaccine side effects can quickly turn into something that people are starting to consider these misconceptions, that they start to believe that there are side effects that could seriously impact their health in the long term. And as a result, people are being unvaccinated. And the problem with this is, if you look up statistics about vaccines, the people who are unvaccinated are twice as likely to die compared to people who are vaccinated. So you look at COVID deaths and you look at this on a larger scale, and if media algorithms are perpetuating these misconceptions and people are deciding to not get vaccinated because of this, we're looking at higher death rates for our population because of that. So definitely media algorithms can play a huge role in not only small controversies, but also something like a nationwide pandemic. Like that has a huge impact on our world at hand. And if a lot of people are being influenced by these algorithms, then you're definitely looking at higher death rates as a population.
You said that you were a follower of U.S. politics, which is kind of something strange for a first-year commerce student to be interested in. But anyway, we'll come back to that maybe later. Did you watch the last Republican debate?
I don't think so. I was really, to be completely honest, I was really interested in politics right around the 2020 elections. And actually, I was at a school event the day that Trump was elected in 2016. So that was back when I was more interested. And then recently, the only things I've really been following is Kamala Harris, because I think she's a powerful woman and definitely someone that I admire as a politician. But otherwise, I haven't really looked at the debates in great detail.
Okay, well, this argument therefore may fall on deaf ears. But it's interesting, because in the last Republican debate, it was almost as if you couldn't be supportive of vaccines, particularly vaccine mandates or vaccine passports or anything like that. The last Republican debate, it was almost as if different candidates were arguing on who was the most against vaccines and who was against, for sure, not if not vaccines, vaccine mandates. And so this algorithm that you're suggesting, this vaccine, not even hesitancy, but almost hatred, has almost overtaken the Republican Party.
Yeah, completely. And you look at the things that major influencers of the Republican Party promote, Trump being one example. They are also reposting these vaccine misconceptions because they don't believe in them as well, and or they're against them. So even when you look at the links in media algorithms between someone who is very right-wing and someone who's unvaccinated, and a lot of the time the media is correlated, this type of media. So if you're a follower of Trump, then you're also going to be getting articles in your news feed that have to do with being unvaccinated and the risks of vaccines and things like that. So definitely Republicans, there is a group to them that don't like to be vaccinated, and they are going to even fight on who knows more about the reasons why they shouldn't get vaccines, because as they keep reading and as they keep looking on social media, they're just going to inherit more and more information about that.
But then in your article, you're saying effectively that they're not deciding that. It's the media algorithms that's deciding that and almost creating that political belief for them because of they're only being exposed to certain things. So what's the balance of responsibility between the user controlling the algorithm versus the media controlling the algorithm?
Right. So media algorithms, they're not going away. And that's something that we all need to be cognizant of because it's not something that is ever going to go away because social media needs algorithms in order to maintain their viewers. Honestly, like if you didn't, for example, TikTok, if you didn't have a media algorithm to sort through posts, people would be getting completely unrelated information to what they're interested in. So obviously, we can't get rid of algorithms. Now, we can change a few things about them. There's a lot of algorithms that are biased because they are human made. So if you take out the bias in algorithms, then you are taking a step forward in the right direction. But what users need to be cognizant of is what they're interpreting, what kind of media they're reading and viewing. And they need to be the ones to be able to think critically about this information that's being presented to them. So a Republican may read 10 posts about the vaccine side effects, but they also need to be able to think, what are these sources? Are these sources verifiable? Like who's saying this type of information? And you also need to be able to have that self-awareness to go and look up the opposing views and actively listen to the opposing views of other people. So what I actually wrote in my article that when you look at one opinion, you have to contradict it with another one. And once you do that, you're able to look at both sides and then go ahead, make your own beliefs on it, take your own stance, but you need to first be able to recognize that not all the information that's being presented to you is true in social media. And it starts with that step. And from there, you need to be able to think critically about what's being presented to you and improve the way you take perspective on different stances in society.
Okay, but the problem is you said you have to look at the opposing view. You don't have to. The vast majority of people don't want to, and they don't go out and look for it. So that, effectively what you're saying is they should, but they don't want to. People don't want to. There's a concept called confirmation bias that you only want to listen to stuff that confirms that what your bias was before is correct. So how do you force people to listen to the opposite point of view?
That's something that inherently people need to change within. So like educating yourself is the first step. And I find it really interesting because a lot of the time they talk about people who are unvaccinated or Republican viewers, or even if you look at the demographics of Trump voters in the United States. And a lot of the times, the people who vote for Trump they have less education than the ones who don't vote for him, the ones who vote for Biden's party. And I think when you look at things like that, you need to be able to have the desire to research these types of things, read articles about media algorithms, and understand that this is something that you need to do inherently. I talk about in my article how critical thinking, it's a learned process. So it's not something that you can just be born with. It's something that you need to actively try and do. And there's a lot of ways that you can do this, and a lot of it comes from just listening to opposing views. I think about a lot active listening, and I once heard this quote that said that when you're listening to someone, you shouldn't just be sitting there waiting for the opportunity to speak. And that's what active listening is nodding your head to people and making eye contact. It's making sure that when you're sitting through a conversation, you're not waiting for your next turn to speak. Instead, you're listening exactly to what this person is saying and interpreting what they're saying. And this can be applied to media as well, because you need to sit there and you need to force yourself to not just want to pick the option that makes you most comfortable, the option that you feel is already your point of view. So seeing it in the media makes you feel better about yourself. It makes you feel validated. You need to actively force yourself to not do that and to seek out opposing views and to seek out opposing information so that you're starting to learn how to think critically.
Again, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but people don't seem to want to do that. And so how do you get them to do it? Like, could you have an algorithm that, gives you one point of view and then produces the opposite point of view as the next story that you're going to read?
Yep, you definitely can. And everything is computer code. And I think that's a step that we need to take moving forward, because it, like I say in my article, it takes, right now it's about vaccines, and that's already a big enough worldwide issue. But you think about in the future controversies, and I think that uh, media publishers need to find a balance between, they want to be able to use media algorithms because they want to promote specific content. They want users to be happiest with what they're seeing, but that also perpetuates confirmation bias. So when you look at the balance that they're looking for from a marketing standpoint, and then also just from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, they need to be able to start changing these computer codes so that we're not perpetuating these polarized opinions within people. It needs to be a certain level where they can still promote things that they want, and people are still getting enough content that they're interested in going on Instagram and going on Facebook. But at the same time, there needs to be a limit that they reach where they can't just spread this type of misinformation because it benefits a viewer who doesn't want to see different perspectives. And it's interesting because I think Instagram is definitely taking a step in the right direction with that. I've noticed that a lot of their feeds, if the source of a post isn't verified, they'll write that before you can see the post, and it'll say, this is misinformation, or this source isn't verified, this is incredible information, and then you have to click a specific button to still see the post. And things like that are a good start, but definitely when we have the power to make these algorithms however we want them to be, that's something that media producers need to start working towards.
Maybe you should have to click a button that says, and I'm willing to listen to the opposite point of view from someone else. Now, these media companies are private enterprises that are charged with making a profit. That's how they stay in business. And so what they want is they want people to stay on their site and keep looking and keep, looking at different reels or posts or Instagrams or whatever it is that they're doing, because they want to show the ads. And so they want to use these algorithms to give people what they want to see and more of what they want to see. So they get addicted and they stay on and watch all these advertisements. So how are you going to get them to change their attitude and give people a more balanced point of view when they're going to get upset and leave the site, and it's bad for their bottom line?
Honestly, it's a good question. I was actually looking up statistics earlier, and it says that the average screen time usage in Canada is around 3.2 hours per day. And you think about when you hop on your screen and you're looking at different social media websites, and it's while you're waiting in a chair for an appointment, in between classes, things like that, and it's almost unconscious the way you just automatically go look at your phone and hop onto a social media website. So from a producer's standpoint, I see why they do it. Like you mentioned, they want to make money, and that's the ultimate point of it. But I think when you look at things like that, you need to weigh the pros against the cons, basically. So obviously they're going to lose some money because some people want to see exactly what they see. But in compared to that, you look at the long-term effects, and if you were to present this information, all the statistics about the negative impacts of social media, the negative impacts of what polarity in a society can do, you need to also think about corporate social responsibility and how there are some things that corporations do. For example, paper straws. I think about this a lot because there's not a single person who likes paper straws. They're way more expensive for a company to produce. They're about, I think, making a paper straw versus a plastic straw is about 25 cents versus about a fraction of a cent in comparison of production values. And it's not something people want. No one wants a soggy straw to drink their drink from, but it's corporate social responsibility. It's something that will, in the long term, benefit the society as a whole. And that's what we need to look at going forward. Is it corporate
social responsibility, or is it government mandated changes and regulations? Anyway, we're going to take a break for some messages and come back and talk about this a little bit more, and what's caused this and what we can possibly do to solve this this challenge of media algorithms that Hillary thinks are making decisions for us, deciding what we believe, because we end up going into this rabbit hole and only getting information on one side of an issue. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is a very smart, very articulate, and great writer. Hillary Boehm-Edwards is her name. She wrote an article that I was really fascinated to read in the Toronto Star this past weekend on media algorithms. It was actually titled, if you're interested in going to get it, "The Dangers of Media Algorithms. Who is in control of a user's opinions?" And she's got a great story because she told us that her prof said that you get 100% if you got your essay written, published in the Toronto Star, and she got 100% by getting it published in the Toronto Star. And it was a really good, interesting article. Hillary, there was this show, this series on TV, I think it was called Network or something like that. And the guy made the argument in the show that the problem that you're talking about, not necessarily media algorithms, but polarization, is caused because in my generation, you had 2 or 3 news anchors you watched every night, and they were very objective, and they gave you the news, and they were trusted individuals, and that you trusted them to give you the objective truth. But today, news, particularly cable news in the United States, CNN, CNBC, Fox, etc., are more entertainment than they are objective news. And they end up being very polarized. Is the problem that your generation is getting your information from TikTok and Instagram and Facebook versus my generation that got it from a newspaper and 1 or 2 Lloyd Robertsons or Peter Mansbridges?
I think it's definitely social media as a whole is a problem. I don't know if you can coin it to a certain generation. Obviously, my generation is the technology generation, but when you look up statistics online about how many Canadians perceive their news from social media, it's roughly around 82% of the population, which is a huge number and can't just factor in one generation of all of them. I think that social media has facilitated everyone to get news a lot more easily. It's just at the touch of a button. As you were mentioning, you're just getting it from news anchors when you were younger, and that's something that was like programmed. It had a time to it. You had to be able to sit down in front of the TV and watch this. It's not something that you could just pull up at any time during the day. So definitely, as a whole, my generation is getting this type of news specifically from social media. I'm guilty of it too. A lot of the time I'll learn something on TikTok that about Canada that I wouldn't have known otherwise because I don't read the newspaper very often. I don't really go out of my way to do that because I'm so used to having it on my phone. But I think that a lot of older generations of mine are definitely starting to adapt to this new way of technology as well. So everyone's using their phones. They just, even with Google, you open up Google, you open up Microsoft, and there is a whole feed of AI generated news that has been put through an algorithm and it's pushed out to you. So I definitely think it's a problem as a whole, though, because you're right. When news anchors were the only ones distributing news, you could know that it was verified and that the source was verified and that it was fact checked. But nowadays, this news that we're all going through, you have to actually actively look at where the source is coming from and verify that source on your own because you don't know if it's coming from a credible person.
So with this bill C-18 that is, trying to get major Facebook, Google, et cetera, to pay for news, and they've refused. And so now they're blocking news. So we're not going to get actually the major news outlets publishing on social media anymore. So is this problem going to get even worse?
I think definitely yes. Yeah, I found it actually, that's interesting that you mentioned that because when my Toronto Star article was published in the Toronto Star, I happened to post that on my Instagram story, and I had a few friends who texted me back and they said, I'm not allowed to access this through Instagram because it's been blocked by the government. And I found that really interesting because I was sitting there and I was thinking, so I'm writing an article about media algorithms right now, and I just got published for it. And now a credible source like the Toronto Star that actually does verify its information isn't being distributed to viewers. So definitely, I think that's a problem because the greater impact of that is that now on Instagram, not only are you getting the misinformation, but you're not getting the real information.
Yeah. So just to be exact, it's not getting blocked by the government. It's getting blocked by Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram. at least directly, but indirectly, they would argue it's getting blocked by the government because the government is demanding that they pay for it, pay for the access to it. So it's a fascinating problem. So there was a Stanford University study that showed if you took Democrats and Republicans, you put them in a room and you didn't tell them ahead of time that what their political persuasion was, who they voted for in the last election, but you gave them a problem, they actually ended up coming to solutions for the problems. But if you told them either what party they supported or what president that they had voted for, they wouldn't come to a solution because they were too stuck in their partisan, polarized viewpoints. Do you believe that?
Yep.
Does it make any sense?
100% it makes sense. I think, like I mentioned before, confirmation bias, but there's also something called selective exposure, and it's very similar to confirmation bias. And it basically outlines the concept that we choose to read, we choose to take standpoints based on where we feel innately comfortable. So if you're looking at this type of thing and there's someone, and human beings, they can naturally get along. And even more so, human beings are natural people pleasers. So if you put two people in a room with absolutely no affrontations against each other, then let them work on a problem together. Not only are they going to want to incorporate the other person's ideas because they're natural people pleasers and they want to make sure that this person likes them, but on top of that, they're not going to have any prejudice as to what the other person is saying. Now, you add politics to this, and I mentioned before, politics are always a heated conversation. And suddenly, what these people are seeing when they sit in this room together, instead of just seeing another human being that they're working along with, they're seeing all the negative media that they have read before about that political party. So you look at someone and you're like, oh, like, you're a conservative, for example, you're a liberal, and suddenly you change your entire perspective on this person because what you've heard about that certain party is now what you're going to attribute. Those opinions is what you're going to attribute to this specific person. So definitely, I 100% believe that once people know the political standpoint of another person, they automatically have bias against this person that they wouldn't have had previously.
People your age, university students, young adults, etc., are heavy users of social media. How do you think these media algorithms are going to impact them?
I mean, it already has major impacts on university students. I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of time that we spend on social media. So university students, teenagers alike, I would say most of my friends, including myself, have a screen time of 5 to 6 hours a day, something like that, which is crazy. You don't even realize you're doing it at the time, but it happens. And I think that there are very different, but also very impactful consequences of being on social media for this long and being a victim to these algorithms, because the difference between adults and university students is that, well, one of the main differences is that university students, their frontal lobe is not developed yet. So not only does this lead to poor
What?
decision
University
making,
student, their frontal lobe is not developed yet? Seriously?
no, believe it or not, it doesn't develop till you're 25. So like poor decision making skills are
I
a
wondered what was
problem.
wrong with my kids. Now I know.
Exactly. And when you look at the different things, the problem, so obviously politics, we don't involve ourselves in politics that often, but you look at very more large scale things. Like, for example, I always like to use this example that vaping is something that is seriously impacting my generation. It's something that you'd think everyone is doing. And obviously, teenagers and university students know that this can't be good for you. But then you look at things that the media algorithms are perpetuating and confirmation bias is perpetuating. And for example, you go on TikTok, if you like one video of someone vaping, you're going to get 10 other videos of people the same age as you who are also talking about vaping. And then you look at things like one of our celebrity influencers, Doja Cat, who's a pop star, she at the Met Gala in 2023, there's a video of her vaping behind the scenes. And it's like, then you start to realize the impact that this has on teenagers who have an underdeveloped frontal lobe. And you're thinking, these teenagers are now, their ideas are getting validated. So they're sitting there going, well, Doja Cat vapes and all these other people that on TikTok vape, and you overgeneralize that opinion. You decide, well, if all these people vape, then everyone my age must vape. And you completely disregard all the negative consequences of this. So vaping is just one example, but you think about things like body dysmorphia and the way social media influencers Photoshop their things, and you have young girls looking at this media and they're deciding that there's only one way to look that is considered to meet the societal beauty standards. And so there's many studies that show that the way social media is having this impact on teenagers and young adults is it's devastating. There's increased suicide rates, increased depression rates, and things like that. It's something that is going to severely impact our generation, and a lot of that can be attributed to algorithms.
You used a term I'm not familiar with. Body dysmorphia? What's that?
Yeah, so body dysmorphia is basically the way that people perceive themselves as opposed to how they actually, like, let's say someone weighs 120 pounds and they look in the mirror and they think that they're 150 pounds. That's essentially what body dysmorphia is. And a lot of it has to do with how you're perceiving what your body looks like as opposed in comparison to other people's bodies. And it has to do with a lot of negative self-thoughts. It has to do with a lot of low self-esteem. And it's one of the things that my generation talks about a lot because a lot of people deal with this issue. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that all you see in social media are what the societal beauty standard considers as perfect in terms of body types and weight and size and things like that.
What a fascinating conversation we're having with Hillary tonight. Really appreciate her joining us and appreciate the article. We're going to take a final break and come back, and we're going to talk about what we can possibly do about this situation. Back in 2 minutes, everyone. Interesting conversation tonight. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Hillary Boehm-Edwards, and we're talking about media algorithms and an article that she got published in the Toronto Star last week called The Dangers of Media Algorithms. Who is control of a user's opinion? And I found it really quite interesting. Reached out to her, and she has graced us with her presence and her views tonight. And that's interesting. Hillary, I got to ask you what we're going to do about this. You emphasized in the article critical thinking skills, self-awareness, evaluating your own beliefs. How do you do all that? You had some practical tips and strategies for those skills. What do you do to be a critical thinker?
Yeah, of course. So a lot of it has to do with seeking out opportunities when it comes to critical thinking. So you want to be able to train yourself to start perceiving things with a critical eye. So a lot of it has to do with research. You want to research a ton, and you want to make sure that you're pulling from a variety of perspectives. I mentioned before it has to do a lot with active listening. So a lot of the time in conversations, people will find themselves sitting there and waiting for their next turn to speak, and that's not how you're going to interpret different points of view. You also, I find this one funny, is that one of the huge things with critical thinking is that you want to evaluate your sources. And this is something that we've been doing since grade 9 English class in high school. They teach you to evaluate your sources. You can't give Wikipedia as a credible source when you're putting it down on your essay. There's a whole list of them that aren't considered credible, and high school students know that, university students know that, professionals know that, yet they don't seem to consider doing that when it comes to media algorithms. So that's something that you want to take from the school life. That's something you can apply to real life. And you take this critical thinking skill of evaluating sources and you bring that to the media. And when you're sitting there reading an article and you get to the bottom and it says who published this, what time it was published, when it was published, what source it's from, are there any references in it? And these are things that we've been taught since we were young to do when you're looking at sources, and it's something that you need to take and apply to the real world, especially when you're consuming so much media every single day. So definitely source evaluation, that's a huge one. And then I think being self-aware is also really, really important. And once again, that's something you can train yourself to do. So if you educate yourself on the concepts uh like source exposure and confirmation bias, and you educate yourself on the fact that innately you can't change it, but you can be aware of it, and innately you're going to want to find yourself in rabbit holes that validate your opinions. So if you're able to recognize that, and when you find yourself in one of those rabbit holes, pull yourself out of that and take a minute and look up a different point of view, or consider the information that you've been presented and consider how you've internalized this and consider how it makes you feel, then once you can take it from that perspective, and you can take that awareness and apply it to the real world, then you'll be able to think more critically about the information that's being presented to you.
Excellent suggestions. Let me add a few and see what you think of it. The first one I love, where you talk about active listening, and that's, the old adage about seek first to understand and then seek to be understood. So listen with two ears, because God gave us two ears and only one mouth. So we got to listen twice as much as we talk. So I think that is a great first suggestion. The second one I'd give you is balance in your media sources. I've got both CNN and Fox, and I listen to both, watch both, because I really want to hear what other people are saying about an issue and see if it's different. A third would be, I think the way that one gets empathy is by reading fiction, because you end up living for, a couple of days as you're reading a book in someone else's different life. And it may be a different person, different race, different creed, different country, different experience for sure, but you actually live their life through that fiction book that you read, and I think that's really helpful. And to take that even farther, have a friend, go for dinner with someone that's really different, maybe have a different point of view or a very different life experience, because it's the old thing about diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And so therefore, yes, we live in a very diverse Toronto, but if the only people we interact with are people that look like us and pray in the same kind of institution as us, we're not actually getting to inclusion. And so go find someone that's of a different race, creed, color, sex, or sexual orientation, and find out what they're all about and have dinner with them. Anyway, that's a couple of suggestions from me. I got to tell you, you're incredibly articulate for anyone, let alone for a first-year commerce student. And so when you're looking for a summer job, come talk to me. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for the article. I found it really interesting. And good luck in your studies.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's Hillary Boehm-Edwards, who's joined us tonight, talking about media algorithms and that they're making choices for us rather than us making our choices ourselves. Great article. You should go out and try to read it. That's our show for tonight. I remind you, everyone, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Hamilton, at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on social media. My website, Brian Crombie, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and everywhere you can get good podcasts, Apple, Audible, Speakeasy, SoundCloud, etc. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thank you, Hillary. Good night.